On today's episode of Today in World War II, November 26th, the U.S. Navy gets generous with the Brits. The Soviets decide on a new way to use meat in their assaults. The British allowed their a huge tragedy that involved 2,000 American soldiers and America's best ace becomes an ace on this date, and American troops make forward progress and capture a couple of cities in northern Italy. Let's get started. Okay, so on November 26, 1940, the United States Navy gave 10 more of their old World War I era destroyers to the Royal Navy. Now you may be asking yourself, well, why would they do that? Well, this was part of FDR's, President Roosevelt's plan to support the United Kingdom to keep them from falling to the Germans after the Germans took over, occupied France. Uh, the American Congress was still very much anti-war. They did not want the U.S. to get dragged into World War II, but thankfully we had a very smart president in the White House at the time who knew that this America First uh, uh, philosophy was wrong, that we needed to get involved. Now, listen, let's be real. Roosevelt didn't want to fight, but he felt like the U.S. could support the Brits at least. And so he did it by getting Lend-Lease passed through Congress. And then he also did a deal where the Brits would trade bases for destroyers. And so we had these, World War I era destroyers that were in mothballs. And so why not let them so that actually was a very good trade for the U.S. because we got Iceland and we got some British ports in the Caribbean, and the Brits got some desperately needed destroyers. While they would not really be a good option against a modern fleet, they were very good about doing escort duties and convoys, which is really where the Brits needed them. And so it was a win-win for both. So what is also a win-win for both of you and me is for you to subscribe to my channel. Look, I'm not going to make a big deal about this. I'm just asking, help me out, help me grow the channel, subscribe, click the little button on the bell, and that way you'll get notified when I drop these videos, which I do pretty much every day. Thanks. On November 26, 1942, Soviet General Zhukov, who was the overriding overall general of the Soviet forces on the Eastern Front, I guess Eisenhower would be the equivalent on the American side, and Montgomery would have been the equivalent on the British side. He decided that he wanted to make use of, let's say, not the best soldiers in a way that would keep his soldiers from having to do all the dirty work. So what did he do? He decided to uh, form what they call penal battalions. And so they would scrape the bottom of the barrel for bad soldiers, criminals, soldiers that were being punished, and they would be scooped up, put a rifle in their hands, and any attack, they would send the penal battalions out first. Well, they were bullet catchers, right? I mean, it's the idea that the most efficient way to clear a field from mines is to send people across and have them blow up on the mines. Mines are gone, right? Well, and then in World War II, one one soldier's life and the balance was not really um, a factor when you looked at overall strategic goals, and the Soviets certainly had men to spare. So in this situation, Zhukov's philosophy was, look, you know, I can use these people. The terms were you serve for 1 to 3 months. If you survived, then you could go back to a regular Red Army unit. But again, most of them didn't survive. They were very expendable, and the Russians actually have, a term for that. They call it, we call it, they call it meat assaults, мясо, пушечное мясо is what they call it. And it was estimated that during the war, over 500,000 either Red Army prisoners or prisoners from Gulag were taken to the army and put in these penal battalions and sent off as the first waves. So pretty brutal, but I guess when you're in a fight for your survival against Hitler, I guess you do what you got to do, right? So what you should do is like and comment on this video. Listen, every single video I give you the same spiel. I'll keep it really short this time. That little like button down there, thumbs up, click. Leave a comment. Just say, hey, you're great. We love you. You're the best. So all you have to do is that. All right. And I would appreciate it. On November 26, 1943, the British troop ship Rona was on its way from Algiers with 2,000 American soldiers that were going to be delivered to the Italian theater, Sicily and Italy. And unfortunately, the Luftwaffe got in the way. A Luftwaffe plane launched a glide bomber and it hit the ship and it sank the ship. And so, of 2,000 American soldiers and 200 crew members, 1,015 troops were killed, and 102 of the crew were also killed. If you think about this, in some ways, at least for the Americans on the troop ships and the crews on the naval vessels, the Mediterranean campaign was actually much more dangerous for them than in Normandy, the Normandy invasion, because by that time the German air power had basically been decimated. There was only one or two German air attacks during the entire invasion of Normandy, and yet, when you were when the Allies were invading Sicily and Italy, there were constant air attacks, and the Allied ships took a lot of toll, and a significant amount, a not so insignificant amount of soldiers died before they could even get on the landing craft or even get on the beach to fight because they were on those ships. And so the best way to destroy enemy capabilities is not wait till they have a rifle and machine guns and artillery in front of you, is to get them when they can't fight, when they're on the ship's hold. And the Americans did that really well in their submarine warfare against the Japanese. The Japanese would send troop ships to these islands that were going to be invaded by the Americans. The American submarines would sink them. So I don't blame the Germans for doing this. It's just unfortunate. It's a tragedy that 1,000 Americans died that way uselessly by a German bomber attack. So today on on November 26, 1943, Francis Gabreski scored his fourth and fifth victory. He's with the United States Air Force out of England while he was covering the withdrawal of B-17 raid that had bombed Bremen, Germany. Now, you may or may not know who Francis Gabreski is. He was known by his nickname Gabby. He ended up being the one of the highest scoring U.S. aces in the European theater. He was in a P-47 Thunderbolt at the time. In a few months, maybe even a few weeks, he would transition to the P-51, and then he would go on and start even shooting down more because at this time, you know they were recovering for the withdrawal of the bombers. They couldn't escort the bombers all the way into Germany because the P-47 did not have the range. Only the P-51 had the range with drop tanks. I mean, they could fly all the way to Russia. That's how great that fighter plane was. But in this right now, on today, the 26th of November of 1943, all that the American fighters could do would be to cover for the bombers as they came out of Germany, at least save them from being attacked over Holland and the North Sea before they got back to England. He was one of the best aces that we had in the war. And he later, just so you know, a little trivia, he later was shot down and became a prisoner of war, and he sat out the war in a German POW camp. But in some ways, maybe that was lucky because a lot of these aces, they didn't make it. The ones that didn't get shot down, they got shot down, they were killed. So sometimes being made a prisoner saved your life. And finally, on November 26, 1944, United States troops in the Italian theater in Italy captured Monte Belverde and Monte Castello. which is about 61 miles south of Bologna, Italy. The Italian campaign by this time had pretty much just become like a afterthought. It was like the backwater campaign. I mean, they had started this in 1943 before the Normandy invasion. There was a big commitment to Italy, but Italy was not the right place to choose to invade. It was very mountainous. It was very easy to defend. General Kesselring had just made mincemeat of all the soldiers that were fighting, and Italy was known for having many, many nationalities who fought, not just Americans and Brits or Canadians, but Poles and French and different units from Africa. So it was quite the cosmopolitan group that was fighting. Um, you know, it's interesting that after 2 years of fighting, the Allies never even got close to breaking into Germany from Italy. So, they had to go through France. So I guess you had to keep pressure on the Germans. The Soviets needed extra help, but still was kind of a useless place to invade and expect to make any meaningful advances. So I want to thank you for watching this video. It's awesome that you're here. I look forward to giving you one more video tomorrow.